Welcome to the Climate Hive webcast, What Do You Solve? I'm Kevin Drolet, aka Kedro, and I'm here with my co-host and Climate Hive co-founder, Mike Higgins, aka Higo. Today our guest is Susan Chen, the Strategy Director for ReShore Technologies. They are doing fascinating and important work protecting shorelines, and we hope you will find it as exciting to learn about as we did. ReShore Technologies is headquartered in southern Taiwan, and coming from a tropical island frequented by very aggressive typhoons every year, both the west and the east coast are battling severe erosion. Founded by Dr. Ta-Hsiung Peng in 2000, Dr. Ta-Hsiung Peng holds a PhD with 15 years of experience in coastal engineering projects, including bridge pier protection and typhoon mudslide defense. Dr. Peng loves open water swimming and practices Tai Chi regularly, and will learn how this influenced the innovation. ReShore Technologies has completed 2 successful demonstration projects restoring sand depth and width in a matter of months for 2 beaches with very different geographical conditions. And our guest, Susan, is a strategic communicator, passionate about solutions that address climate change. She strongly believes that we are the generation that needs to and will make significant impact on our future through nature restoration, renewable energy transition, accelerated CO2 removal, and systematic behavior transformation to change the trajectory towards a better world for both people and planet. And with that introduction, I'd like to hand it over to Higo to kick off our conversation today.
So, like every business, when it starts, it has an aha moment, a moment where somebody sees a problem, recognizes a problem, and then decides they have some unique capability to go ahead and address it, to solve it, right?
Mm.
So, as it relates to ReShore technology, could you give us the aha moment and your approach to this problem of restoring eroded shorelines?
Absolutely. So I think ReShore came to life when Dr. Peng, the founder of the company, was practicing Tai Chi on the beach one day. So as Kevin mentioned, he is an avid open water swimmer. He
Mm,
starts his day off by swimming in the ocean, and he's been doing that since young. And he sees how, typhoons and storms uh, damage the shoreline, year after year. And Tai Chi is a martial art that, involves like gentle flowing movements instead
mm,
of like harsh attacks. And I think that's where the inspiration came from, for him to come up with a solution that is more flexible in nature versus like a hard impact, fighting against the waves that wash against the shore. So he decided to pursue a PhD and like test out his idea. And that was the moment when like ReShore came to life. He worked with the team in the hydraulics engineers to come up with the first pilot design in 2009. And we were able to observe like significant improvements and just phenomenal sand accumulation in a short period of time using this technology that, is really first in the world. So I'm excited to tell everybody more about it today.
Awesome. I wanted to actually ask you also because I think a lot of people don't understand shoreline erosion. Like why
mm.
is that a big deal? Is it a big deal? And so I wondered if you could sort of maybe set the stage and talk a little bit about shoreline erosion.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoreline erosion is essentially the gradual loss of beach sand and land due to natural forces like waves, storms and hurricanes, and rising sea levels. That's happening from like the melting icebergs, right? So as we see more of that happening, there's flooding, there's community being displaced, especially in like the low lying atoll areas along the Great Lakes. There's a lot of land and beach
Mm.
being lost to the waves. And the effects are really devastating. Aside from, loss of habitat for the marine species, there's also communities that are forced to relocate all over the world because they live along the coast and their homes are being washed away. And it
Mm.
also has like severe economic damage, threatens tourism, fishing, and there's a lot of repair that goes into um, you know going into restoring eroded shorelines, approximately 500 million a year just in the US alone. And so this is a very big problem across the world. And the existing solutions are not very sustainable. Like they do work in some ways, but I can share a little bit more about that using some photos. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. I remember because I used to practice actually another form of Tai Chi called Kenbudo uh, at the beach in the mornings with my sensei, and I would watch the beach, and they would have dredging periods where they would come and they would just dump like massive amounts of sands and recreate the beach. And I think it'd be super interesting to understand what does ReShore Technologies do that's a little different, because it does seem like they have this technology, but why is that not necessarily a good, technology for building back the beaches?
Yeah, so Kevin, the dredging that you're talking about is beach nourishment, which is a soft method that's in coastal management, where you're either, pulling in sand from the seabed and pumping it onto the beach, or you're transporting sand from another place and by truck, and then, smoothing it over. And the problem with this is, as you said, you have to repeat this process very frequently. Essentially, the sand that you bring in will be washed away at the very next storm. So over time becomes really costly. And at the same time, when you're dumping the sand, you're burying beach organisms alive. And it's a foreign substance also, you're changing the sand and the water quality also in the area. So beach nourishment, it is good in that, you can immediately replace the sand and it still keeps the natural look of the beach somewhat. But the downside is that you have to keep repeating the process. And then on the other hand, we have hard methods that are, geotextile bags. For example, these are polyester bags that are filled with sand. You line it up along the beach, and they do slow down the wave impact on the shore, but it is visually unappealing. And these bags break very easily. And so every time, the sandbags breaks, you have to go in and repair it. It requires constant maintenance. And over time, that is also costly, and it changes the look of the beach as well. The sand is essentially gone. Another type of hard method is a seawall. We can build up a seawall and the water would just be reaching in. But the downside of this is that you create scour at the bottom of the seawall. So it kind of digs in, as you can see here. The beach starts off wider, but when over time the water hits the wall and it goes downwards and it creates scour, and you're going to see loss of sand over time. So when you put in the seawall, you're essentially diminishing the amount of beach width you have in front of it. And they're also very expensive to build.
So you're identifying the sort of three solutions that are out there right now. So one is this dredging, and I would actually see these boats in the water pulling sand from the sea and then bringing it onto shore and then dumping it like the dump truck you showed. Then you have basically sandbagging it with these with these bags, which you can see how that would be problematic. Even it's just where do all these bags go?
Unsightly, yeah.
Who wants to see that? And then, or reducing, essentially, you have beach loss with the seawall. So those would you say those are the three main ways that beach erosion is?
There's one last one. We'd say, offshore breakwaters or groins and jetties, with their rock revetments that you place along the water. The problem with that, it disrupts the flow of the current, and then you often cause erosion further down the shore. Or in this picture, you can see you can cause like a crescent-shaped beach behind the structure. So
Mm.
it is a very localized solution, and it's also very expensive. So this is another example of a hard method that doesn't really restore the beach back to its natural shape. I think when we look at, these existing methods, traditional ways of doing this, there are long-term issues. And, the difference between what we do is that, we're thinking about how to harness the power of nature and work with it, not against it, and to like really rebuild our disappearing beaches. So the idea behind this flexible solution came from Tai Chi, where we're somewhere between a soft and a hard method, and we try to like as the waves come in from the ocean, they all carry a certain amount of sand in each wave. And so what our technology is doing, we're capturing that sand that's suspended in the water that's being washed in by the waves and slowing it down just enough that it starts depositing right behind the structure as it passes through. So it is permeable instead of being a complete hard structure that you hit hard against. So the waves would slow down as it goes through the layers, and the sand would end up on the beach, both behind it and in front of it.
Yeah, it's super interesting because the one of the things on just thinking about the solutions that currently exist is I hadn't really thought about the just natural habitats being destroyed.
Yeah,
Of course, they would. I mean, any of these methods, you're essentially putting something artificial. You're not working with nature, so you're destroying
right.
something that exists, and that has implications. It always does when you start messing with ecosystems and biodiversity and these kinds of things. So.
So what we, actually what we found in after we implemented our technology, there was an increase of biodiversity in the area, because the structure became a home for like additional organisms. Let me pull up that slide too.
Oh,
So
organisms actually what got on the structure itself?
yes.
Interesting.
So
It
here's
would be native, right? Native sand versus sand brought in from a different area. Interesting. I never thought of that.
So with our Der-Horng Boat, which is our ReShore Technologies' latest technology that we rolled out this year, is a boat that has permeable layers in which the waves would pass through and slow it down, reducing the wave energy and causing the sand to deposit. This is what it looks like. It is not the layers are all permeable, and you can have like 3 anchors that secure it to the seabed, and it moves freely with the waves that pass through it. So
So cool.
when you
How
have it in
how
front of,
big is how big is it? How big is the boat?
it's 14 meters long.
Okay.
Mm.
So it can protect up to uh, 200 meters, which is like around 100 yards
Yeah.
distance. And as you see, the waves wash in from all different directions in front of the boat. And as they pass through, this entire area behind it, up to 100 yards, would have sand deposited only in like a fan shape. So when you line up several boats along the coast, about 100 yards from each other, you're able to extend that protection to a longer distance.
The Der-Horng Boat, a new coastal management system. And it's anchored in the seabed, moves freely with the direction of the waves. Yeah,
The waves should
that's
pass, starting from like the highlighted section, um, through the entire structure to the back, and there's multiple layers of energy reduction panels. And as the waves come in with the sand, you'll see that it accumulates both behind the boat and in front of it on the seabed. So you will be
Mm.
increasing the height of the beach as well as the width.
no, I know, Susan, that prior to the boat, you all had also another, like the boat is an evolution, right? In terms of the ReShore Technologies products. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. So the boat, we derived that design as an optimization from our proven technology, which is the Der-Horng Lattice. It looks like this. It has, it can be extended, but these are panels. The white part is the energy reduction panels that, the waves would pass through in the permeable layer. And we incorporated this part into the boat and increased the number of layers. So the erosion lattice is only one layer, which the waves pass through, but on the boat we have 5 layers. So it will be even more effective than that. But thanks, yeah, like Kevin said, our first technology was erosion lattice, and that's the one that we worked with the National Cheng Kung University in Taiwan to come up with the initial design and implemented it in southern Taiwan on a beach in Tainan. And this is what it looks like when it's constructed. You have panels that can be extended into longer, but essentially they're around 24 meters long. And the sand would deposit in the same format, in a fan shape behind it, but the area covered is shorter, probably around 80 to 100 meters, because it doesn't move. It stays on the beach. It is installed into the seabed using high pressure water pumps. But the same way, when the waves wash through the sand increases both behind it and in front of it. And so that's what we were able to observe in our completed projects.
And I think that's such a vivid, comparison to how the Tai Chi played in, right? Where you're working with the ocean because the ocean brings sand in and it takes sand away, right?
Yeah.
And so, the brilliance of what you guys have done is you've created this infrastructure that goes in the ocean that doesn't interfere with that motion, right? It's not impeding the ocean. The ocean is moving right through it in its standard way, but it's harvesting the sand that's in the water, right? And returning it, which I
Yeah.
think, you think of Tai Chi, you think of that motion back and forth, right? It's where this story really comes alive for me is how different this approach is to those other approaches where they're bringing it in trucks or they're, sucking it out of the ground or building walls or dropping, rocks into the ocean or dropping, sandbags you're working with nature in its motion,
Yes.
to hang on to what's already in the water. I think that's amazing. And it's completely obvious, with your explanations, how this is not going to bury the life that's on top of the sand, right? Because it doesn't happen immediately, and how it's depositing the sand that belongs there as opposed to sand being relocated. So I think that's really eloquent.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah,
Mm.
precisely. We think about, being more of a mobile type of solution, which is unheard of in the history
Right.
of coastal management methods. And so
Yeah.
with the boat, we've even optimized it to be able to move it to different places. So once
hmm
you've accumulated enough sand in this area, you can just drag
Right.
it over using another boat and redo the process again. And the maintenance is very easy too, because it's in a boat format. So you only have to take out certain parts and replace it. It's very easy to bring it to shore to have that done. And yes, when you incorporate that movement from the waves into the structure and like you kind of move with it, and it decreases the impact on the structure itself. So the damage is not being done directly on the structures. That's why, we're able to see it doesn't require that much fixing over time. There's only certain minor components that you need to look
Yeah.
into every few months.
So I know from our previous discussions, you've got some good success stories. I thought maybe you'd share one of those here with some of the successful work you guys have done and the impact and the results.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. The before and after are pretty impressive for what.
Absolutely. Let me show some measured results that we have. So we started with a project in southern Taiwan. It was an area that was seeing a lot of erosion, and it was close to the opening of a river. So as you see in this picture, there's a river opening into the ocean, and there's a lot of sand being washed down from that river into the surrounding area. So there's a lot of sediment. And the area was around 383 meters long that we measured. And previously they've tried methods in the same area, by using bamboo barriers or tetrapods, which is, large rock revetments, which is another type of hard method that's very often used in Taiwan. And they were not effective before. So, the government was willing to try something new. And after the Der-Horng Lattice was installed, we were able to see the restoration. So let me show some before and after. This area on the left, water was hitting up closer to the trees and taking away the sand and the roots of the trees as well. And after we put the Der-Horng Lattice in place, the restoration, you can see the sand completely covered the entire area and extended really far into the sea. This picture here shows when initially we put in the first 3 sets, and you can see there are like poles that stand really tall with a little bit of red on it. We put those in place to measure the height of the sand in which the accumulation happens. And on the right picture, you'll see those same poles completely buried in sand now. They're not a necessary part of the structure. They were just used for measurement. But once the sand accumulated so quickly over it, it was hard to remove them. So it sort of is an eyesore, but that was necessary for our first project to be able to actually physically look at where the sand reaches in terms of height. So the tip of the lattice becomes this tiny pyramid on the right side that is still poking out from the sand. So the total increase was 106 centimeters in height in this area.
And the lattice stays, it ends up staying buried. Does it continue to work, or how does that work?
Yeah, in this particular case, because there was so much sand that accumulated so quickly that the entire structure became buried under sand. So you do have the option of removing it by using high pressure water pumps. But we discussed with the organizations in charge of this area, and they thought, it's fine to leave it in place. It kind of acts as a foundation to keep the sand secured. But by all means, you can remove them if you would like. In this case, they were just left there in the sand.
And the Der-Horng boats are a little different then, right? Because they can get moved around. They don't get buried in the same way. Is that correct?
That's right. So I think that's another part that's, even the optimization in our design is that you don't have to worry about it being buried. The sand is going to accumulate behind it. So once you see that, the height of the sand is starting to reach closer to your boat, then, that's time to move it forward or to another place so you can keep extending that width of the beach if you would like. The results that are achieved is a very, very flat and gentle slope along the entire coast, as you can see in this picture. So the current state of the Tainan beach post-restoration looks absolutely beautiful. And 10, 20 years later now, it is still in the state. So very sustainable.
So the lattice went in 10 years ago. How many years ago did it go into this first project?
2009, so that was
like 15
years ago.
16 years ago. Wow. And it's
remarkable.
Sustainable. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Very sustainable. Another one I would like to show is a different type of geographic condition. It was a project that we were asked to protect a cliff that was collapsing from hydraulic action. So this was in part in Kinmen, which is a small island close to China. And this site, very different from the first one, has no rivers nearby or abundant sand sources. So given that, we were seeing there's structures along the cliff that were close to collapsing because of the hydraulic action that kept hitting up against the cliff and just was at danger of falling into the sea. And after we installed the Der-Horng Lattice in this area, we were able to see that the waves no longer reach the cliff. So that's why you can see plants growing along the bottom. There's no seawater that's affecting that area anymore. And also we were able to stop the cliff from collapsing and keep the building in place. What's special about this is you can see in this picture in the distance, there is, the city silhouette. That's where Xiamen is, Xiamen, China. At that time, this was they were constructing a artificial island to build the Xiamen airport. So China was dredging a lot of sand from this area to, pump onto the area for building the artificial island, and we were seeing sand being lost and eroded on the Kinmen Island side. And so with that, that's only 5 kilometers away, just like 3 miles, and very close distance. And you're fighting over natural resources, I suppose, in a way. And after we installed the erosion lattices, we were able to stop the erosion from happening and bring back about 10 centimeters of sand width, despite all that sand being taken away just a short distance away.
Yeah, that's a remarkable story. Real success story. So very, very profound here. What other uses of this technology are you thinking about? I think we touched on them briefly at the beginning, right? When you think about, who could really benefit from this, it seems governments, right? But private industry, right? Particularly resorts, people that rely upon a beautiful beach, right?
Mhm.
What else comes to mind?
Yeah, definitely, private property owners, resorts that, rely on their beautiful beaches to attract their customers, but
Mm,
also a lot of communities, fishing communities that rely on having that beach. If the sand is gone, they can't send their boats out anymore. Or people that just live in the area that are,
mm,
in such danger of flooding and storms that destroy their homes. If you put this type of protection barrier in place and secures the land, is essentially a land reclamation solution. We're losing massive amounts of land all over the world to the sea, and the existing methods are not able to retain it. In fact, seawalls actually reduce the amount of land or
hmm
sand that
Yeah.
is there. Yeah, so government agencies, private property owners, and or like philanthropic organizations that are looking to help with areas that are more affected by climate change and working on environmental justice. I can see this being a very good method for them to make a change, make an impact.
Susan, I had another question on cost, because obviously it's not, free to make or deploy your technology, but how do you compare to some of the other, these 3, 4 methods that currently exist from a cost perspective?
Yeah. Uh, the hard methods that we spoke about, involving seawalls, rock revetments, and sandbags, any times that you're transporting rock, it's very expensive because they're heavy. They need to come from a far place, and the trucking, once you put it in place, you can't move them anymore. It just stays there. Um, those are really expensive methods, and maintenance is also hard to do. Um, Compared to a soft method, which is sand nourishment, it's cheaper to do per nourishment, but you have to repeat it year after year. So overall, when we look at how we compare in cost to the other methods, we are definitely a lot more cost effective, taking into consideration that our installation is so easy. You can install a boat. Once the parts arrive, we just need to assemble it on the beach and then deploy it into the water, anchor it to the seabed, and you're done in a week. For one or two boats, only takes a week to install, and maintenance is just every couple of months. You could look at minor parts that need repair. So with that taken into consideration, our cost is definitely the lowest compared to the alternative methods.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and clearly the most flexibility in terms of your ability to move it, right? You can
Absolutely.
move it and move it down the shoreline. Very, very flexible.
Just the fact that you can reuse it cuts your cost
Yeah.
too. Yeah, so we've done two demonstration projects in Taiwan, and they were funded by the government. And we did two projects in Thailand with a partner that we've established there. So all of these projects have been funded by local governments, and we're looking to probably look for additional partners in that regard to work with us in as local you know local partners that can execute on the projects and connect with either government agencies or private property owners on how that works. In terms of investment, I don't think that our founder is looking for that right now. Is looking to do it ourselves, but definitely open to different ways to collaborate.
Yeah. Mike and I
Makes
showed
sense.
we showed the technology to somebody in our that works with Climate Hive who's older,
Right.
and he's like, Miami needs this. Why aren't they in Miami? Miami, they should be in Miami. All the beaches in
Miami
Miami,
is in such danger, and
right?
yes, they're I think the ways that they tried before don't work, and they're at the brink of sinking, and it's very dangerous. Actually, I'm very sad because I still haven't visited Miami myself, and it might not be there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, those are very clear areas. Areas that are prone to hurricanes, tsunamis, very clear how you can create this restoration process. Kickstart it, build it back. Really fascinating. Great story, too. Great tie-in with the Tai Chi, the founder, the harmony with nature. Such a great story.
Yeah, I would like to think that, ReShore Technologies is very different from the other coastal solutions out there.
You gave us some pretty startling examples of older ways that shoreline restoration has been happening. But I see with the movement of the waves and sort of your integration with nature that you do more than just you know drop something in place to stop sand from going out. It seems like your harmony stops that, but also brings in sand. Could you run that through us again? I want to make sure I really captured your differentiation as it compares to those three examples you gave us.
Sure. Yeah. So what our solution is very unique is that we are able to protect and restore at the same time. Whereas other solutions such as sand nourishment, you're restoring, but you're not protecting.
Mm,
Or seawalls, you're able to protect, but you're not restoring the sand. So with Der-Horng Lattice and Der-Horng Boat, we have that dual functionality where after you put it in place, we're both slowing down the waves and accumulating the sand at the same time using just one structure. And so, we're utilizing that natural wave energy to capture and redistribute the suspended sand. So it creates a really flat and even surface layer by layer. And also that, it is removable and mobile. Once you have an area restored, you can relocate as needed. There's no other solution on the market that has that capability. So I think
mm.
that's what makes this really stand out.
That is unique.
It is, Mike. When the holidays roll around, because you said you were going to get me some beachfront property, I'd also like the Der-Horng Boat. Just if you could throw that in,
Hey,
amazing. Um,
I'll buy you a property that's 35 feet out in the water, and then we'll
yes.
just create the shoreline. What do you think?
Yeah,
You
there you
know,
go.
we'll just,
Actually, I'm not sure of that. Okay, think about that.
I'll just,
Um,
put
The
a
sand
flag
might
way
be
out there.
shifty in that
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
and we're
Susan,
going to dump. Go ahead.
what about this year? As we kind of close out our conversation, we'd love to know, like, what do you got planned for the year? What are some of the goals for 2025?
Yeah, we're really excited to roll out our new product and find partners to implement it for the Der-Horng Boat, because we have very high confidence that it's going to work even better than the Der-Horng Lattice. So that's our main goal for 2025. We want to be able to find a partner and implement this and scale it up across the world. Really looking, because as climate change continues to worsen, we're seeing so many more frequent storms and hurricanes hit our coastlines, and it is something that unfortunately we're not able to stop, but at least we can try to adapt to it. And I think this is a very easily implementable solution for a lot of vulnerable coastal communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that erosion boat, I can't imagine it being any easier with just three anchors. You roll it up
Mhm.
and anchor it in, and that's it.
That's it.
Remarkable.
Yeah. Sometimes the genius solutions are so simple, right? It's like,
Right.
uh,
Yeah. And then you let that water flow through and the lattice grabs the sand. It's remarkable.
well, Susan, thank you so much for being part of the show today. Um, I know that we're just both really excited about what you all are doing, that you came up with this innovation, and we wish you the best of luck. And we'll certainly tell as many people as we know about ReShore Technologies and the great work you're doing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mike, for letting me share here today. This was really fun, and I hope that more people will hear about ReShore Technologies and start to rebuild the shorelines around the world.